Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus 2 is a game coming out soon, and being Admech focused, naturally it's on my radar. I was quite a big fan of the first game, I liked the tactical turn-based strategy gameplay, and it's even what inspired me to start collecting Admech minis. With my approach to models now, some of my first thoughts about the new game are kitbashing and converting things from it. And while most of the units are faithful recreations of existing minis, there are a few unique and interesting tech priests in it. These unique characters are prime candidates for new models, especially given there's only one current named character mini for the army. The first one I wanted to try and make is Tech Acquisitor Scaevola, as she in particular is very standout. She's from Styges 8, not the standard Mars Forge world, and she's a bit radical for a tech priest, having quite the penchant for Necron xenotechnology. There's a few pictures of her design in Mechanicus 1, but for the upcoming sequel, a lot of the priests got redesigns, which are somewhat simplified as they're going to be playable units, and they're even composed of a lot of existing model parts, so they're already kind of kitbashes. So far there's been a demo for the game and a trailer highlighting some leader characters, both featuring Scaevola, and while I had a few plans before, this footage was enough to show me what I needed for reference and spur me into making a Scaevola mini properly. For the building, after a bit of looking around, I had collected some bigger bits that roughly match the larger parts and important elements of Scaevola's design. I got the lower body part from a tech priest Dominus, since they're robes with a lot of small mechanical legs sticking out, which I just turn around. I had the upper body and a few of the connected arms left over from my call build for that big hunched over shell, and for the head, I got one from a Space Marine Eliminator because it's got that plain scalp with techie goggles and a mask part. Of all the tech priest designs from Mechanicus 2, I think Scaevola might be the most unique, with some of the least parts based on existing pieces, so I had my work cut out for me to try and get everything to match somewhat closely. Firstly, I had already cut the big cog fin part off of the call back piece. Then to the front of it, I added some of these tube or vial type pieces that are from Call's lower body. I added the remainder of one to the chin to match that part of the design, and I also drilled holes in the cheeks for wires to go into later. The robed front arms already meant for the Call torso worked well, but for the back arms holding the weapons, I needed to make them out of some other pieces. For her back left arm, I used the Call upper arm that normally holds his big gun, but replaced that with the Volkite blaster from a tech priest Dominus. And for her back right arm, I combined a few different parts. Another of Call's upper arms, a Sicarian forearm, a Skitarii right hand, and a macro stubber also from a tech priest Dominus. Even though I had removed the big cog fin, there were still a few other indents on the back where other bits from the Call kit are supposed to be attached, but I figured I could use these to my advantage, turning them into these circular parts on Scaevola's back, that I imagine are various ports or plugs. I used a combination of drilled holes, plastic rod, and various round Admech bits, like those cut from the bottom of guns or power packs. Then I got around to doing some very important green stuff work, starting with using it to smooth the waist connection and ensure the upper body sat at the right angle, before working on the head area, which started with some skull wires. For the hood, I took measurements of the model's head to figure out the size I'd need for a flattened version I could cut out of rolled out green stuff, that I first left out for about an hour so the surface sets a little and is easier to work with. It took a few iterations, comparing and testing on the model, then once I got the dimensions right, I added a few extra details, like adding a small fold at the front to match the robe sleeves, then also poking a few holes and cutting small tears, to match the type of robe details already on the sleeves and lower body. I placed it on the model, lightly manoeuvred it into place, and pressed in some folds and curves using some soft silicon-tipped tools, to not leave any larger unintentional marks. I also lightly pulled down on the ends so they looked a bit more tattered and worn. Also out of green stuff I made some wires with my Green Stuff World wire roll maker, which I slotted into some holes I previously drilled. And since the skull wires were pretty covered, I added another that came out of the hood, as some of her head wires in her first design did that too. Another vital part of her design is her Omnisci axe, which is also pretty unique, and the closest existing part is a Tech Priest Manipulus's Omnisci staff. Using one of those as a starting point, I removed the top cog tooth to replace it with a Necron gem, which I cut down from a Triarch Praetorian's forearm gun. Also from the same Necron sprue, I noticed the Lynchguard's arms that hold staffs, which was just the part I needed for Scaevola to hold her staff. Then there were just minor parts left on Scaevola herself, being a Tech Priest Dominus's power pack that I also added a wire to connect to her back right arm. And to both match a minor element and cover my imperfect grain stuff, I added a few wires around and below her neck, for which I just used some from Skitarii and Electro Priests, as they're more detailed than the ones I can make myself. For her base, I figured some Necron ruins would match the game and also be thematically appropriate for her, and I remembered a video from Andromeda Studios. So following it, I pressed some Necron patterns into green stuff spread on the base, using the sides of plasticard pieces as some precise and consistent tools. For painting, I was tempted to put her in my own Forge Worlds colours to neatly fit it in my existing army, but to be properly faithful, I tried to figure out her official Stygius 8 colour scheme. Starting from a Chaos Black spray prime base, I roughly dry brushed Corvus Black for the robes, Mephiston Red for the big armoured shell, and Lead Belcher for all the silver parts, just to get a good base coat for coverage, which I followed up with regularly painting the same areas with the same paints. I had trouble finding a good match for the copper gold metallic trim and detail parts, but I ended up going with a 50-50 mix of Runelord Brass and Balthazar Gold. I used Rakarth Flesh for her forehead and arm, then I also painted a lot of areas with Grey Seer to prepare them for later simple glow effects with contrasts. And for those contrasts, I used Tesseract Glow mixed with a small amount of Karandras Green for all the vials on the back, the eyes, Necron Gem on the staff, and light on the power pack. I used Athematic Blue for the macro stubber and a few smaller lights. Eandon Yellow was used for the Volkite Blaster, and I also used Black Templar over some silver parts for a dulled down but still slightly shiny finish, like on the lower part of the staff and some of the wires. Then with those done, I shaded the model with a mix of Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade. After that, I painted the base, heavily dry brushing Mechanicus Standard Grey all over. I applied some of Pro Acryl's Fine Grey Earth texture paste for some rubble or dark dirt around the edges. I lightly dry brushed the whole thing with Dawnstone to roughly highlight it. Then for a slight green tint and dull glow, I put Karandras Green contrast in the lines and Necron symbols, with a bit of Tesseract Glow for lighter spots. Then I shaded the rest with the same Agrax and Nuln Oil mixed I used for the main model. For the final step, I highlighted the model, using the original paints to brighten specific raised areas of the model after the shade slightly dulled them, or using paints a shade or two brighter to highlight certain upper edges. I used Mephiston Red for the top parts of the shell, Corn Red for the edges of the sleeves, Hashut Copper for the copper gold trim and details, Tooth and Coates' Mithril Blade for the silver, Eshin Grey and Dawnstone for the robes, Moot Green for the green glowy bits, then a very small amount of Dawn Yellow for the most raised edges on them, like the staff's gem. And that's how I made and painted this model for Tech Acquisitor Scaevola. It's not perfectly accurate, but with how the design varies between different games, and between arts and 3D models, I think mine is still decently close, especially for being made out of mostly existing parts. And with her weapons, she even mostly matches the profile of a regular Tech Priest Dominus, so it would be pretty easy to use her in proper Admech armies. This was just a quick build to try a single custom tech priest, as I'm pretty excited for the upcoming Mechanicus 2 game, and there are definitely others from it I want to try making too. I'm thinking of maybe Videx next, but let me know what other characters you'd like to see models for. If you want to see how I'm getting on with my builds between videos, you can follow me on other social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky and TikTok. If you want to try building this yourself, I've linked the main kits I've used in the description with my Element Games affiliate link, which helps support me while also getting you models for less than official Games Workshop prices. And if you want to support me more directly, I have a Patreon where I post weekly project updates, as well as other things like early access to videos, discussions about future build plans, and even stuff like building tips that I make available to access even without paid membership. I'd like to thank those currently supporting me on Patreon, who are Kyra, Morse Free, The Lich's Laboratory, Philip Mitchell, Gamrus, Mechlord of the Bad Dragon Clan, Always Abe, Quirky Perceptions, Beadwag, PP, Fozea, Darren, and Yaroslav Altunin.